Yes, people around the country, it is in many ways an auspicious day today because it's the 14th, so it is Pakistani independence. And around this time of year, of course, we are a day in front, behind, I can never remember actually, but it's also Indian Independence Day. And so we have a situation where nations were created, and lots of people would say that's a wonderful, beautiful thing, and we should all be in the street celebrating. And of course, many people do that. But tonight we are asking, is celebrating independence the right thing to do? Is it a responsible thing to do, given that the circumstances of the creation of India and Pakistan and eventually Bangladesh were so bloody and so unfortunate? Is that just a part of our history that we should keep in mind and we should celebrate because ultimately we left colonial rule and that's what matters overall? Or is there a real problem with just brushing over those problems? I do want to hear from you on this, so get in touch with us on 81869. You can tweet at Asian Network. I want to start by welcoming Ihtisham. Ihtisham, how are you doing?
Very good.
Are you all right? Tell us about yourself. Where are you from?
I'm originally from Pakistan.
You're from Pakistan. Whereabouts in Pakistan?
North, called Peshawar. It's a very famous place.
I love Peshawar. They have really good chai, really amazing tea in Peshawar.
The food.
And the food's amazing. There's a place called that does Jarsi Tikka.
Jarsi Karai.
I've had all that stuff. It's an amazing place. Tell us, do you think we should be celebrating Independence Day, and why?
As a Pakistani, I think I should say 100% yes, we should be celebrating because, first of all, being independent is just the greatest blessings ever, to be an independent. And the reason for that you see the current situation in especially Kashmir, what's going on in Kashmir these days. And Muhammad Ali Jinnah said this 70 years ago. He presented the two-nation theory that we cannot live together because we have so many things. We have so many things in different, so we cannot live together. And that's why then he started this struggle for this independent. And today, I'm thankful to Allah and Muhammad Ali Jinnah especially that we are an independent country. In Pakistan, the Muslims can go to the mosques, the Christians can go to the churches, the Hindus can go to the temples, and Sikhs can go to the gurdwaras with any fear, with anything. So we are
in Pakistan. Are you talking about?
Yes.
Okay, I mean, some of that stuff is debatable, isn't it? Because there's an argument around minority rights in Pakistan and the fact that a lot of people, a lot of Christians, a lot of Hindus, a lot of Sikhs, a lot of people of no faith in Pakistan would say they don't have those freedoms. And also there's an argument, I'm just putting this out there, that of course independence, I'm sure most people, the vast majority of people would say it was a brilliant thing because colonial rule was evil and it was terrible and it was exploitative. But is there not an argument that actually, as well as people like Muhammad Ali Jinnah, there were people like Gandhi, and there was a huge, wide-ranging campaign which meant independence was a brilliant thing, but countries shouldn't have split up. I mean, what would you say to that kind of argument?
I mean, you asked that there's so many people raising question about minorities in Pakistan. Pakistan has just opened a corridor for the Sikh community they can visit Pakistan freely with no visa. They can just live there. I mean, you must have heard of this. The recent Chief of Army Staff and Imran Khan, they have just inaugurated a place there with Nankana Sahib. So there's the one example of that. And your second question was?
So in regard to, did Pakistan have to split off? Because I'm sure everyone would agree that independence is a brilliant thing. But do you think there being a separate country, there being Pakistan and eventually Bangladesh as well, do you think that was inevitable? Do you think that had to happen?
Yes, of course, that had to happen. And, as I said earlier about the two-nation theory, there were so many people that were against this. The recent statement of the CM of the former CM of Kashmir, she's a very pro-Indian, she's a very patriotic Indian, and she said, Mehbooba Mufti, she said she was against the two-nation theory, but whatever the Kashmiris are facing, whatever they are going through, she thinks that Muhammad Ali Jinnah was right. and whatever he did was the right job. And also another patriotic Indian, Avaisuddin Avaisi, I don't know if that's the right name, from Hyderabad, he just said the other day as well the same thing. So I think that there was the right decision. You see, whatever, as I said earlier, what's going on in Kashmir, the people were restricted to stay in their houses. They didn't go and offer Eid prayer.
But I'm just going to put this out there, but what we're seeing in Kashmir, that wouldn't be happening, would it, if there was if Pakistan hadn't have split off, if it was one territory and it was one country, would there still be that conflict? It wouldn't be happening, would it?
Well, there were so many things indifferent, as I said. Muhammad Ali Jinnah said that, in fact, when he studied in this country, when he gone back, he joined Congress to get freedom from the British. He thought Congress will work for Indian, Hindus and Muslims and all the Indians. But later on, he realized that we are two different nations. So that's why he represented the two-nation theory. But
right. So you think it was effectively two different people, and it was never going to work?
Yes.
Yeah, it's thank you so much. I want to bring in Sukh. So, Sukh, welcome to the Asian Network. How are you doing?
I'm good, thanks.
So you are from, is it Sikh PA? Is that right? Brilliant. And tell me a bit about the work you do. And if you just come closer. Yeah.
So basically what we do is we connect Sikh organisations, Sikh individuals, people doing fantastic work across the community to mainstream media organisations so that we can get them on your show, so we can get them on these sorts of platforms. We can let people know about what they're doing.
Brilliant. And so when you hear Etsham saying it was inevitable that there were going to be two nations, what do you make of that? And do you answer the core question as well? Do you think we should be celebrating?
I mean, for me, as somebody whose family is from the Indian side of Punjab, you could say, independence, I can't conceive of independence without partition. You know, it was Punjab that was partitioned on that western side, and it's just far too immediate for my culture and for my heritage to think of independence. If you think about independence as sort of being free and freedom, or how many people lost not just their freedom but their lives for that, how many people were displaced, how many people, you've mentioned the Kartarpur corridor just now, Sikhs have been denied really basic freedoms about going into Pakistan for the last sort of 70 years. And, you have Amritsar and you have Lahore in two different countries now. They're about 30 miles apart. And there were two really key sort of areas for Sikhs. And the line went straight down the middle of them. And I don't think that's been to the benefit of the Sikh community at all, either in Pakistan or in India.
So would you then not celebrate? Would you go that far?
Yeah, I think when I reflect on the trauma, the horror, when I see, for example, what Sikhs have faced in an independent India and sort of the years of Indian repression against Sikhs, I reflect on all of that. I can't bring myself to celebrate it.
So, Sukh, tell me about the conversations in terms of your peers or your family, parents, grandparents, and so forth. When they talk about that time, and I don't know your grandparents, how far back they go and if they're still with us, but when you hear those stories, what kind of stories do you hear from that time, and what feelings do those stories invoke?
So a few years ago, I actually went to the border. I went to the border ceremony at the Atari border when I was visiting Amritsar. And when I was on the way there, I saw the border fence and the border lines, and it struck me that it went through fields, right? It went through fields. And you got villages on either side of this border who probably were in contact with each other, who saw each other for centuries. Literally, their lives were together. And all of a sudden, there's this line down the middle. Now, I have a lot of friends from other parts of India, Gujaratis, people from South India. And we always joke and laugh because when you look at sort of Punjabi culture, Punjabi cuisine, Punjabi language, and then like their sort of cultures, we say, well, actually, how much do we have in common? We fall under this label of Indian. We're called Indian. Technically, we're under one nation. But our cultures and our heritage is just so different, We're as different from as somebody born in Munich to someone born in Madrid, for example. And yet I probably have much more in common with someone in Pakistan, Punjab, like literally 40, 50 miles.
Of course. And I have to say, if you go to somewhere like Amritsar or Delhi and then you go to Lahore, and I've walked those streets, the smells, the sights, the feelings, the people, the features on the people, they're all very similar.
There's so much animosity now. Look at the rise of Hindu nationalism. Look at, some people in Pakistan as well, and the fervent nationalism. How much hate has been created by this line between them, right? You got two nuclear powers now. This isn't like small countries squabbling with each other. They're nuclear powers. They've got nuclear weapons, and they're fighting, over territory. The line of control doesn't even extend in some places. There's no line, right? If you look at the glaciers back further up north,
Of course.
there's not even a border there. So you're talking about the perfect conditions for conflict,
Of
which we've
course.
seen numerous times since independence.
which is terrifying.
Terrifying for the whole world.
So I want to ask you a very specific question. So you've very eloquently just told us about how you feel Punjabi and how you feel, that's an important part of your identity. Do you feel Indian?
No, basically.
You
I
don't?
think I know that technically I'm Indian, right? People ask where are you from? I'm from India and Punjab, like that. But then, I've been working last 2 years on a case pretty much of the Indian government lack of justice and the repression of Sikhs, and of one particular case in particular of a British citizen of Jagdar Singh Johar,
Okay,
who's been taken out. I've been working quite closely on that case, and every time I'm looking at like Indian justice system, I'm thinking, no, how much justice is there for like Sikhs doing human rights work? Every time I think of India, I think of the human rights abuses now.
Sure.
I think
And of course, it's important to say we don't know the ins and outs of that specific case, but you don't identify as Indian. Would you identify primarily as Sikh Punjabi then?
Yeah, I think the idea, but it's just much more accurate, right? It's much more accurate. It actually tells you something about myself, right?
Yeah.
If I say that I'm Punjabi, if I say that I'm Indian, I don't actually know how much it's telling you.
Because it
about
could mean a multitude of things.
Yeah, I mean, like India wasn't even a thing in the way that we think of it now 100 years ago, because there wasn't no India as we know it now.
I have to say, I just tweeted about this a little bit earlier, just saying what's coming up on the show. And I just got straight away such a response in terms of people saying, oh my God, how can you even be asking this question? So I think it's the kind of thing, and particularly I have to say, Sukh, I think some of the stuff you're saying is perhaps going to provoke a response. You can, of course, get in touch with us, 81869, tweet at BBC Asian Network. Let us know what you think. I want to bring in Javad Khan now. Javad, welcome to the Asian Network. How are you doing?
Good, thank you. And you?
Good. I'm really good, thank you. So I know you are Pakistani, and are you celebrating independence?
Yeah, well, the thing is, in Britain, we don't really celebrate, over the top like in Pakistan, like with parades and stuff like that. But I'm acknowledging Pakistani Independence Day and its significance.
So what shape will your celebration take? What will you be doing?
It might be simple as, just putting on some nostalgic Pakistani songs from my childhood.
Like Nazia Hassan, Dil Dil Pakistan, that kind of...
Yeah, that stuff. Or, sitting down, having food with family, discussing it with family, that sort of stuff.
Okay, brilliant. So that all sounds kind of very civil and upright and nice. And I'm sure lots of people would say, well, what could possibly be the problem with that? But then when you hear someone like Sukh talking about the horrors of partition, do you think that has a part to play in your biryani eating on this day?
Yeah, I mean, I completely empathise with sort of the horrors of partition. I grew up hearing stories from my grandfathers on both sides of my family speaking about partition, speaking about people they lost on the way, speaking about 3 months of just travelling by foot, the severe hardships that these people went through, and the difficulties they went through. So I'm very aware of the horrors of partition. But one of the things that I like to sort of remind myself is that we remember the dead and we fight for the living. So it's this idea that Pakistan, India, Bangladesh, they're not perfect by any means. They have a lot of problems, but the idea is that independence happened, whether you think it was right or wrong, whether you believe in one nation or two nation independence, it happened. And my whole thing is that we have to fight for a better Pakistan, a better India, a better Bangladesh, subcontinent where we can all live in peace and harmony together. And for me, that's what Independence Day is about, the idea that there is a brighter future if we work together and cooperate.
So for you, it's all about the future. It's not about looking back.
No, I wouldn't say that, because I think it's important to recognise the historical context of it, the suffering that people went through, the sort of callousness of the British Empire and how partition was implemented and how independence actually came to fruition. So it's not about sort of not looking back or acknowledging the history, but it's about saying this awful thing happened where hundreds of thousands, maybe even over 1 million people died. died. People were displaced, but having that in memory and saying, look, these people died, and we're in their memory, we're going to fight for a better future and for peace and prosperity in our land.
Yeah, I completely hear that. It's just in that process then, how much celebrating can you actually do? And I just want to put this stuff out there. You know, there's estimates in terms of how many people actually died. Some of the lower end estimates are around the 200,000 figure mark. And that goes up to about 2 million. These are estimates of how many people died during that period. And so I hear when you're saying you acknowledge that, but ultimately you would still celebrate. I just wonder how much of that is actually registering and hitting home, because there's one way of looking at it, which is actually there was such a catastrophic loss of life and so many people were uprooted that we should be mourning what happened rather than celebrating it. How would you respond to that?
I mean, I totally understand, like, mourning the loss of life. Just one personal story is that when my family were moving from Hoshiarpur in what is now Indian Punjab to Faisalabad in what's now Pakistani Punjab, a relative died on the way and they had to bury him on the way. And they went and settled and went back to try and find his grave. And they weren't able to find it because there were countless graves, countless unmarked graves. So many people died. So, like, the human cost of partition is, like, very much, like, real to me. Like, it's you know, happened to family members. It's what
it's part of your own family's history.
Exactly. But still, you know, we acknowledge the tragedy, and in their memory we fight for a better future together. And we recognize, look, we needed independence from the British Empire. Fundamentally, that's the thing we celebrate: independence from a settler colonial power that had caused untold misery and suffering to our people for hundreds of years. So that is what we celebrate: ending that colonial rule and having the independence, the freedom to fight for a better future. That's what I celebrate.
Javad, I hear that. Stick with us. We'll come back to this in a moment. If you are at home, you can get in touch. 81869. Tweet at BBC Asian Network. We'll hear more from Javad and Sukh and Ihtisham as well. We are talking about Independence Day and asking whether we should be celebrating. I've got Ihtisham with me. I've got Sukh with me. I've got Javad down the line. I was just looking at my Twitter. You can get in touch with us, 81869. You can tweet at BBC Asian Network. Ganiz on Twitter says Pakistan Independence Day should be both a celebration of our independence, but it should also be a reminder that the partition has negatively impacted many, such as Kashmiris. Both celebrate today and remind yourself that we still have far to go to reach peace and unity. Javad, in terms of what is going on in a contemporary context, it's kind of unavoidable. We have to talk really about what is going on in Kashmir. Do you think that's a reason to be celebrating? Do you think it's a reason to be grateful for what we have? Or, you know, we heard earlier from someone that said celebration should actually be banned because what's happening is so terrible. What do you think, Javad?
I don't think that, I wouldn't go as far to say that like Independence Day celebration should be banned because of what's happening in Kashmir. I mean, first off, what is happening in Kashmir is a tragedy. The political repression, the violation of human and civil rights, the stripping of Kashmir's autonomy is just disgusting to see. But I think part of that should feed into Independence Day, because, you know, the issue of Kashmir is first and foremost one of self-determination, the idea that the Kashmiri people should be able to decide their future. So I think it is important to remember like the contemporary context in what's happening in Independence Day. And like I said before, part of Independence Day is, you know, hoping and dreaming of a better future. And part of that better future is a more just, a more equal life for the Kashmiri people.
Right, sure. So comment on that. What do you think about what is happening right now in Kashmir in the context of Independence Day? Do you think it's a reminder of... I mean, because it can be construed two ways, can't it? It can be construed as everyone would agree it's terrible and there shouldn't be conflict. But many people could see it and think that's exactly the reason why there shouldn't have been two different states. And it's exactly the reason that we should have had a united country, and it's exactly a reason why we shouldn't be celebrating at this time of year. What do you make of what's going on?
I mean, the cultures of both India and Pakistan are both so diverse, right? And Kashmiris are people that, to be honest, I don't know too much about. And the thing is, I don't want to do the typical thing of speaking for them. So I think the only thing we can do is ask them. ask them. But how can you do that when they've shut down the internet, when they've shut down the mobile data? How can we do that when they're not even allowed on the streets, when they're not allowed to protest? There was a protest in Srinagar that the Indian government even denied, despite foreign outlets reporting it. These are like the basic things of democracy. And if we can't have that, then those in itself are like the warning signs. Those are like really big sort of warning bells.
I think there's a lot of truth in that. I just want you to take a listen to something. Take a listen to this. This is Nadia that we spoke to a little bit earlier.
I think the whole idea of celebrating independence is to express gratitude for a land or a space where a majority can express their culture, their religion freely without persecution. When you see what's happening to Muslim minorities, or for that fact any other minority in various countries, for example Muslim minorities in Myanmar or in parts of India or in Palestine, you can't help but celebrate and give thanks for having an independent state or land which you can call a part of your identity and where you can actually feel safe or take refuge in. And that doesn't only apply to Independence Day for Pakistan or for India. It actually, I think, applies to all different nations, cultures all around the world. Everybody has a right to celebrate their Independence Day.
Ehtisham, I want to bring you in here because that was Nadia we were hearing from. What did you make of what she had to say? I mean, her basic point, she was saying that it's great that we have Pakistan as an independent homeland for Muslims, especially when you see suffering of the Muslim community around the world. Do you agree with her?
Yes, of course, the Muslim community is suffering around the world. She mentioned Kashmir. So as I said earlier, that India is claiming to be the world's biggest democratic country in the world. I mean, the biggest democracy. And what's happening in Kashmir that, as I said, I was talking to a friend of mine earlier. He's studying in the UK. He's from Jammu Kashmir. He said there are people, the women, they were pregnant. Date was fixed, everything. There are people who are on permanent medications. They can't go and get their medications. The people, they can't go for the Friday prayers, especially the Eid prayer. So I think, it's such a great blessing that we are an independent country, Pakistan.
Is there not a point, though, I just want to put this out there, is there not a point that when we talk about any religious minority and we talk about Muslims having a homeland in Pakistan, we know it's just it's a statement of fact that there are more Muslims living in India today than there are in Pakistan. So does it make any kind of sense that there was this separate country created, first Pakistan and then, of course, Bangladesh? Or, it comes back to this question, isn't independence actually, and the fact, the way it panned out, isn't there an element of tragedy in that? So this is a really specific question. Ehtisham, would you be celebrating today if there wasn't a country called Pakistan, if there was a united India? Surely that would be a reason to celebrate, or do you think differently?
Well, if there was no Pakistan, of course, we would be a part of India. And if there was everything, like I've got Indian sitting next to me and he just don't want to call himself an Indian because he thinks he's not getting the rights, what he deserves. So if we were a part of India and we were not getting our rights, we wouldn't be celebrating. I would be calling myself whatever XYZ from Peshawar or from North or whatever. I wouldn't call myself an Indian.
So you don't think you would be able to assert your Indian identity because, as Sukh said earlier, he doesn't feel particularly Indian. He feels Punjabi. And so you don't feel that you would be able to assert yourself as an Indian?
Well, if I was getting all the rights what a normal Indian is getting, if I was getting everything as an Indian citizen, I would be celebrating. I would be very patriotic Indian. But if I wasn't getting the rights, what Sukh just talked about, I wouldn't call myself an Indian. Yeah.
Sure. Sukh, do you want to come in?
No, I just fully agree, right? Like, if you're a part of a society, if you're getting equal treatment and protection, if you're not being oppressed, then of course, you want to be part of a country, you want to love it, that's to the betterment of everybody. But if you're having economic rights stripped away, if you're having your territory reduced, if you're having like language politics being played, if you're having, your holiest site being attacked by the Indian army, like, what else is there
then
to
there's
say really after that?
a problem. I want to bring in Javad in before I do. Amrit's been in touch. Amrit Singh says, do you think oppression has ended now? Failed states, corruption, religious fundamentalism is hardly freedom. I mean, Javad, it's the same point, isn't it? That, if we look at Pakistan and India, I would say actually in the case of Pakistan, probably even more so if you look at minority rights, they're just not there really, are they? Isn't that a problem, or do you agree with what Ehtisham was saying?
I mean, I can see the point that, like I said before, like Pakistan, India, Bangladesh are by no means perfect countries. They have a wide range of problems that need addressing. But part of celebrating Independence Day is this idea that we are now independent, we can change our future, and it's the idea of struggling for a better future. That's the main thing. Like, of course, the oppression of minorities has continued after the end of colonialism, but it's the idea that now, once you are independent and free, you can continue struggling, continue making gains, so that you can improve freedoms for everyone.
I completely hear that, but is there any kind of future that you see where there could be a united country? You know, could there ever be a united India again, or do you think it's inevitable that these countries will get smaller and smaller and people will break off?
It's a tough one to say, because, you know, as we see across the world, not just in Asia, but right across in every continent, like, you hardly see like countries coming together to form bigger countries. Like the trend is...
What about the EU? Could it happen like the EU? Could you have like a united Asia with Pakistan, India and Bangladesh joining together again?
I mean, potentially as well, you could have sort of a collection of countries coming together, but like still within the European Union, you have your independent nation states who have control like over certain affairs within their own country. So, I mean, if we're talking about like one nation, like one actual nation state, I think it's very difficult to see that happening within our lifetimes. But if you're talking about greater cooperation, like greater links between the countries, that's what I want to see happening, and that's something I'll fight for, and I'm sure others across like the South Asian diaspora across the world and within South Asia will be fighting for that as well, for greater links. And I think it's possible. All we need is the political will, the desire for change, and to work together and for unity and harmony.
Is that desire really there though? So maybe you have an opinion on this. Is that desire really there though, when we see, you know, at the moment, in the past couple of weeks, we've seen two countries, you know, almost, it feels like, on the brink of possible war again. So how do you get it to a place where people are thinking with a more kind of internationalist mindset? It doesn't feel like that's going to happen anytime soon, does it?
Both ways, I think. You got to look both at cooperation between different countries, but you also got to look at what countries are doing internally in their own internal affairs. You know, I think if you had greater autonomy in different states in India, if you had more respect and more secured rights and freedoms for different people in India, you'd probably get much more support for the Indian project. But if we look at what's going on in India right now, with the rise of the Hindu nationalism, with the rise of like really far right fundamentalist sort of, you know, you got lynch mobs roaming around, you got Muslims being killed. The last thing they're hearing is Jai Sri Ram. Like, what have we come to when that's happening? Of
course. Would you say this is then a kind of a Modi-specific issue? Because obviously Modi and the BJP, they're Hindu, nationalist, I think inarguably right-wing party. And because they are, do you think we are seeing at the moment people really questioning what it means to be Indian, when perhaps 5 or 10 years ago they wouldn't have done because the BJP weren't in power?
Yeah, I think that is quite a fair thing to say. I mean, you don't want to erase what's happened before, right? So, you know, there have been continued oppression beforehand, but I think there has been a shift, you can definitely say, with the rise of the BJP. It makes me laugh, actually, because I have friends who go on about Trump and they say, you know, look how bad Trump is, look how terrible Trump is. And I'm like, you know, if you knew half the stuff of what, you know, the BJP sponsored people, what BJP supported people, not all of them, but, you know, there is a growing trend of really quite horrific behaviour in the name of like very far-right Hindu nationalism. If you knew what was going on there in supposedly the world's largest democracy, I think you'd be just as concerned as you are about Trump.
Absolutely. So can I ask you a personal question? You know, in terms of, you know, you speak about this stuff publicly, you're on the Asian Network tonight, and I know you've worked in this area, and, you know, you've spoken about it publicly before. It's all on your online profile and so forth. How do other Punjabis, and more broadly, how do other Indians respond to you? Are you ever accused of being unpatriotic?
Yeah, probably. I mean, to be honest, I'm always looking to have a conversation, looking to have a dialogue. You know, I'll go to somebody and I'll say, these are my grievances, and I think they're quite legitimate ones. You know, at the end of the day, I'm for human rights for everybody. And when I see human rights being denied to people, that's what gets me angry. That's what I want to fight against. I don't want to fight against any sort of symbol or anything like that. You know, when there are specific grievances that are affecting real people, that's, you know, I want to use my voice to try and support them.
I think that's brilliant, and I think that's really progressive and open-minded. I also know, just practically speaking, that when it comes to patriotism generally and India and Pakistan specifically, I would say South Asians, we're like very, what's the word? We're like very hot-headed about the whole situation. And so often people don't want to hear logical arguments, and they don't want to hear about individual communities and human rights. And so have you ever got in any trouble for the stuff you say?
I wouldn't say trouble. I mean, you have disagreements with people and you respectfully disagree with somebody, but the examples that I try and use are very clear-cut ones of, say, like I mentioned earlier, Jagdar Singh Jha, a British citizen. I mean, it's fairly obvious what's happened to him. I don't try and, report accusation or rumour. I think where you have clear, concrete examples, where you have specific grievances, you can try and tackle them bit by bit. If there's a broader picture that emerges from that, then you can talk to somebody about it. But I'm here today talking to you about it. I'm talking to other people about it as well. This is what I want. I want a conversation about it. So
I really appreciate that. This is a question for Ehtisham and Javad, actually. I think Sukh is quite a introspective Punjabi, and what he's saying is it's quite critical of India, and he's quite open with that. Do you think there are similar voices of dissent in Pakistan? And the reason I ask that is, Javad, if I could start with you, I think a lot of Pakistanis, because they kind of feel under attack anyway, we are super gung-ho and we are super patriotic. And I know I just came back from my parents' house a couple of days ago. When my parents were watching ARY Digital or Geo or any of these state broadcasters, you'd be forgiven for thinking that Pakistan was the most kind of economically sound, most just, most morally upright nation in the world, because that is that's the image we'll project. That's a bit of a problem, isn't it, Javad? Tell me, what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I totally agree that it is a problem of, not realising the state that Pakistan is in, and it's because for decades, really since the creation of Pakistan, you've had a political elite that have sort of suppressed the will of the Pakistani people for their own financial and political gain. And I think part of this conversation about how we move forward, how we view independence and, the idea of being Pakistani and being South Asian, is how do we build sort of like a collective conscience that is real about the conditions we face, that is real about the problems facing Pakistan, and how do we link those problems with the ones that people are facing in India? Because at the end of the day, we face the same problems. We face the fact that we have millions of people who don't have access to school. We have poor quality housing. We have lack of jobs and lack of economic opportunity. You have exploitation of entire regions, entire nations, and it's how do we build sort of that collective will to change that. And for me, that's also part of what Pakistani Independence Day is, building that collective will for real change within our countries. But it is a long journey ahead of us. Like, as you said yourself, like, you'll know from your own family, and people listen will know from their families about their attitudes they have, and this idea of like exceptionalism and everything's all right. But I think it's down to people such as ourselves who have a platform to break that down and really get people to think about the conditions they're facing.
Yeah, that's brilliant, Javad. So it's just gone 11 o'clock. I want to come back to this in a moment. And after 11, I want to talk about progress and what we see happening in the next 10, 20, 30, 40, 50 years in our quote-unquote home countries. We can't do the show without talking about Priyanka Chopra and what's happened recently. So we're going to be discussing that as well. Do get in touch with us, 81869, tweet at BBC Asian Network. We are asking if we should be celebrating Indian independence. I've got Sukh with me, I've got Ehtisham, I've got Javad on the line. Who got in touch? Black Designer got in touch, say, shaking my head. So you want to be under British colonial rule and oppressed forever? Seriously, this is a daft question. Yes, there was bloodshed. It was instigated by the British. Not got the minerals to ask the real question. I wonder what the real question should be. Black Designer, get back in touch with us and tell us what you think the real question should be, seeing as though you're so offended by the one we're asking. And then Cal's been in touch saying we should never celebrate because there's nothing to celebrate. Too many lives lost. It is wholly inappropriate. I want to play you guys something. This is from Khadija that we spoke to a little bit earlier. This is what Khadija had to say.
Independence Day on 14th August should not be celebrated the way it is celebrated every year, because I've been hearing and I've been seeing, yes, people are coming out and, you know, they're celebrating the way they do it every year. That shouldn't have been done, and our Prime Minister should have actually banned celebrations for this day this year. The flags of Pakistan should have been replaced by the flags of Kashmir, and we should have shown proper solidarity for our Muslim brothers and sisters in Kashmir who've been suffering for 72 years now. So I mean, this year it should have been something different in my view.
That was Khadija there. Ehtisham, do you think Independence Day celebrations in Pakistan should be banned? Do you think that's a bit extreme? Do you think it's a good idea?
I think it's not banned, but this is what is official notice that we will celebrate as a solidarity with Kashmir. And if you go and see around, watch the images, the videos with the Pakistan flag, they are carrying Kashmiri flag as well to show solidarity with the people of Kashmir. And
are people also wearing? I heard a thing about black armbands. Is that being done?
That's going to start after 12 o'clock here. And It's already started in Pakistan. The people that have changed the DPs, the social media, profile photos and everything. And they will be celebrating 15th August as the Black Day. And so this is what's happening in Pakistan now. And I think they should stand with the people of Kashmir. And they are. And also they have restricted so much, like the Prime Minister of Pakistan, Imran Khan, said they're not going to spend so much on the events this year. They will be spending much money on poverty, education, human development. So the money we were spending on 14th of August celebration, that funds will go to that human development. So it's a good step from the Prime Minister of Pakistan. And I think we should carry on this every year.
You sound really optimistic about the future of Pakistan, are you?
Well, the future of Pakistan, I think it's
that sigh says it all. Seriously,
I think it's in the great hands now. Yeah.
So you're an Imran Khan supporter?
I am.
Yeah.
I mean, as a journalist, I should be neutral. But the reason I'm supporting Imran Khan, because whatever he's doing, and everyone can see, he's spending more on education. He's more spending on human development. Zero corruption. There's nothing. So I think every Pakistani is supporting Imran Khan, and that's why he's elected as a Prime Minister of Pakistan, and his party is ruling.
I mean, maybe not every Pakistani.
You can't say every, but he's got the majority.
Of course. Okay, he was democratically elected. Javad, can I bring you in here? The reason I ask about Imran Khan is, and we've been discussing where Pakistan is going and independence should we be celebrating. One thing that we can't overlook is the position of minorities in Pakistan. We know that if you are Hindu or Sikh or Christian or of no faith, then in much of Pakistan you're in a lot of trouble. Do you think Pakistanis are even considering that conversation when it comes to independence, or do you think we're just overlooking it, Javad?
I do think minority rights, like any discussion in minority rights in most countries, it just gets overlooked because by the fact that they're the minority means they can be overlooked by the majority. So I think it is important to raise awareness of the struggles they face. And in all honesty, I think that should be part of Pakistani independence, recognising where we have to make progress, where we have to make changes. And minority rights is 100% one of those areas where we have to sort of start a conversation and a debate in the country, because it's not just like the government or that needs to change its policy. It's about the people. It's about people changing attitudes, and that'll only happen through dialogue and discussion.
Yeah, Javad, you sound like quite a progressive Pakistani, but would that be right? Can I call you that?
Yeah, that's...
Is that right? You'll take it. You'll take progressive Pakistani. Yeah, brilliant. All right, so you guys might have heard the name Priyanka Chopra. You might know who she is. You probably saw the video online. This just happened a few days ago. There was a Pakistani woman who stood up during a kind of press audience with Priyanka Chopra. The young woman was called Aisha. Take a listen to this. This is what Aisha had to say.
Hi, Priyanka. Hi, what's your name? Aisha. Aisha. So, it was kind of hard hearing you talk about humanity because as your neighbor, a Pakistani, I know you're a bit February 26th, Jai Hind, hashtag Indian Armed Forces. You are a UNICEF ambassador for peace, and you're encouraging nuclear war against Pakistan. There's no winner in this. As a Pakistani, millions of people like me have supported you in your business of Bollywood, and you want nuclear war.
Whenever you're done venting. Got it? Done? Okay, cool. So, I have many friends from Pakistan, and I am from India, and war is not something that I'm really fond of, but I am patriotic. So, I'm sorry that if I hurt sentiments to people who do love me and have loved me, but I think that all of us have a sort of middle ground that we all have to walk, just like you probably do as well. The way you came at me right now, girl, don't yell. We're all here for love. Don't yell. Don't embarrass yourself. But we all walk that middle ground. But thank you for your enthusiasm and your question and your voice.
Right then, so I'm just putting this out there. We'll unpack this in a second. This is like the quick fire round. Sukh, is Priyanka Chopra an imbecile?
Yeah.
Etsham, is she an imbecile?
Yeah.
Javad, is she an imbecile?
Yep.
Oh my God, everyone's actually in agreement. So can I start with you? What particularly from there do you take? Is it the whole thing? What particularly? You've got plenty of options here. What particularly jumped out at you as particularly silly and particularly imbecilic? Is imbecilic a word? It just is because I created it. Go for it.
Oh man, where do I start? To be honest, I'm not a fan of her. Like many Sikhs and many Punjabis, she tweeted a tribute to KPS Gill, who's known as the Butcher of Punjab.
Yes.
So, to me, she's been someone who, I have zero respect for quite a while, and for many Punjabis and Sikhs. So for people like us, it wasn't a surprise. The remarks in question, the clip you just played, I think it's the bit where she says, whenever you're done venting, got it, done. It's like, oh wow, like that's when you know that the person in the audience hit a nerve, right? That's when you know that she got called out on it, and that her instinctive reaction is to deflect it back. And I was just like, okay, well, you're not, like I just said earlier, right? I just spent 5 minutes going on about how I like having dialogue with people. She could have easily have said, okay, what about my tweet do you think was objectionable? But she didn't do that.
But she reduced it to another
not just
level.
her, not just it, but her, right? She reduced Aisha, the questioner.
Yeah.
She reduced her quite publicly. She tried to humiliate her. And, whatever you think of her views, and I have no respect for her views anyway, but that sort of person, especially that sort of celebrity, nah.
Do you think it just struck such a chord because she wasn't expecting that kind of question? The reason I ask is, obviously the question was asked because Priyanka tweeted thing with Jai Hind and hashtag Indian Armed Forces. Do you think it was that kind of just unthinking patriotism, or do you think it was actually informed and intentional?
I mean, I think it's the latter. And what makes me say that is because the previous tweet years ago about KPS Gill as well, I think, she does have, I mean, I don't know, right, her mind, I don't know what exactly what she's thinking, but I think that there is that element or that side to her that is probably, if you're seeing tweets like that, and she does want to communicate this, right? You don't have to put everything on Twitter as a celebrity.
Yeah.
So what does she want to communicate to her followers? And she can be treated like a goddess, right? In India, we all know how popular she is in India, and now following her marriage, she's just as popular in Hollywood as well. She's somebody that, on the face of it, has it all and has a huge following in both Holly and Bollywood. So I do think that is very interesting.
Huge position of influence. Etsham, go on. Why do you think she's an imbecile? What do you make of what she said, and what in particular offended you?
Mobeen, she is an artist, and artists are the peace ambassadors. They bring the peace between she's got fans in Pakistan, she's got fans everywhere around the world. She should have tweeted something about peace like so many other celebrities did. And apart from that, she's a goodwill ambassador for the UNICEF. I mean, UN is just an independent. It's not supporting or anti-Pakistan or India. It's an independent, and the ambassadors should be an independent, and they should be talking about peace, prosperity.
But let me ask you this though: should she be independent? Do you mean impartial, or do you think she actually could have used her position to say, war should not be an option. We should, should she have actually asserted a position which would have perhaps been more difficult but more justified?
Well, so many celebrities, they tweeted about peace. They tweeted about a solution. Malala tweeted about peace solution. She should have tweeted something like her. Look at her age and her age.
Yeah, okay.
That's the difference.
So you think she should have used her position to calm things down?
Exactly.
Effectively. Okay, brilliant. Thank you. Javad?
Yeah, I mean, I was surprised as well to find out her political views were such trash, given that, like, I grew up watching Priyanka Chopra in films like Dawn, and I've heard to come out with this, I'm like, what the hell? I mean, first off, Sukh, before, when he was talking about like the condescending nature, trying to belittle that person asking the question, it's a bully tactic. Try and make the person feel inferior to delegitimize their point. Like, it's awful. One thing that really struck me as well is when she said we have to find a middle ground. As far as I'm concerned, when it comes to war and peace, there is no middle ground. Like, you can't just say, well, maybe we'll send a few airstrikes. For me, that's a middle ground. Like, no, you either for war or you are for peace. There is no middle ground there. And she was, she was trying to triangulate and move it away and say, we're all here for peace. We're all here for love. If you're promoting, like, war, like saber rattling, you are not for peace and love.
Then you're not there for peace and love. We just had this tweet in that just said, Priyanka Chopra, we should just never look to celebrities to show us what they believe. And you've got to remember, this is a celebrity who invited Modi to her wedding. Is that true? Does anyone know? Was Modi at her wedding?
Yeah, I think he was.
Is that actually true? I didn't realise that. But yeah, she's not getting a lot of... Does anyone want to stand up for her? I don't think anyone does today. If you do, if anyone's at home and they want to stand up for Priyanka Chopra, get in touch with us, 81869, tweet at BBC Asian Network. We're going to wrap this up in a little bit, but I just want all of you to just think about the future and the next kind of 10, 20, 50 years. Where do we want to be in terms of this time of year and independence, and what... And I think, Sukh, I should come to you first, because I think maybe, given what you said at the start about not feeling Indian, I wonder if you want to see a reshaping of what that whole territory is. What India would you like to see in the future?
I don't think it's for me as someone living in the West, right, to like project what I think should be, because remember, that's exactly what the British did.
Of course,
right?
of course. But in terms of people that are in those territories,
I want their voices to be heard. And if they say we want X, we want Y, or we want Z, then I want the government to follow through on that. If they're demanding devolution, I think there should be devolution. If they're demanding something bigger or something, more stronger, then I think that, again, like self-determination is a fundamental principle.
So I'm just going to ask you, I'm going to put you on the spot here and ask you to be a bit more blunt, because I completely appreciate you saying it's not up to you because you're a Westerner, you're British, completely get that. But if you were a betting man, I don't know if you are, would you say it is the right thing and it is justified that in 50 years India will be devolved and states will be more autonomous? Do you think that would that be progress?
Yeah, I think if it's securing minority rights and if it's securing individual rights better, then yeah, that would be progress.
Thank you, Sukh. I really appreciate that. Etisham, what kind of Pakistan and what kind of India would you like to see?
I want to see a Pakistan as in whereas we are independent as educational, whereas everybody's educated. Around 31% of the teenagers, they're out of the primary schools. There's no education. There are 51% of Pakistan living the poverty rate. So I want everybody to get their rights. The human development is nil, you could say. Is only the upper class people get that. Terrorism, that's one of the major issues in Pakistan. So if we solve all these problems, I think we could be a great country in the next 20 years.
Right. Yeah, I completely hear that. Javad, is there anything you can add to that in terms of how we should be looking at Pakistan and India's future?
Yeah. I think sometimes, and this is coming from someone who has a background in electoral politics, is you have to look away from the politicians, because politicians come and go and obviously they have a massive impact, but really the future will be decided by the people. and they're the ones with the capacity to change. And in my mind, they're the ones who want to see a better Pakistan, a better India, and a better region. So for me, it's about empowering those people to make the changes that Pakistan and India needs to create a harmonious relationship between the countries, where we have peace and prosperity, where you have solidarity with each other, because at the end of the day, like, we face the same struggles. And when we find common solutions to the problems that we all face, the idea that, you know, there's so many Pakistanis and Indians living in poverty that don't have, you know, basic freedoms, human rights, the minorities questions, education, housing, all these massive issues, really sort of giving people the power, you know, giving power back to the people to really make a difference. So that, you know, going back to this idea of Independence Day, this independence actually means something, and what it will mean is the ability to change their future.
Yeah, so it'll be less jingoistic, and it'll just be about what has been achieved and what can be achieved in the future.
Yeah, 100%.
Javad and Sukh and Etcham, I have to say, you, all three of you are the most civil, lovely people. Honestly, normally there's like things flying around the studio, people kicking each other in the... Well, it's not that bad. But you've all agreed on stuff, and I think it's kind of funny that you all agreed that Priyanka Chopra is an imbecile. So can you please give yourself a round of applause? Thank you so much.